3 years ago, I carried 3 tiny wolf pups out of a burning forest, never expecting to see them again. Last week, they came back, grown, wild, and with a debt to repay. When I saw the wolf step out from the bend and stop 3 steps from my tractor, my heart froze because I realized this was not an accident. He recognized me. For a second, I forgot to breathe. The engine clattered under me, rattling like a box of loose bolts, and the morning fog hugged the field so tight it felt like the world had narrowed to the size of my front wheels and his eyes. I thought this was where it would end, with a lunge or a flash of teeth, and I braced for it. But nature had a different surprise waiting. He was a big gray, taller than my thigh, ribs hidden under winter-thick fur that hadn't yet let go, though the frost was gone. He didn't crouch. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't even flick an ear like most wild ones do when a machine's noise grates on them. He just stood there and looked straight into me, the way a person looks when they are searching your face for a name. The tractor coughed and idled. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I reached to cut the engine, then stopped, then reached again, like a man stuck between 2 doors in a fire. Finally, I turned the key. The field went quiet. The quiet felt heavier than the noise. The wolf blinked, slow, as if to show me he was not going anywhere. That was when a picture rose in my head so sharp it stung my eyes. Smoke like a black river pouring through trees, pine needles popping from heat, the choking, bitter taste that sticks to your tongue for days. And in the middle of it all, the tiny throats of pups crying from a hole at the base of a burned birch. 3 years back, I had driven this same tractor into a wall of heat that made metal sing, dragging the blade to cut a path to the creek. I had no right to stop. I stopped anyway. I remember a shape in the haze, a she-wolf, pacing, eyes on the ground, and then on me, a silent storm of fear and fury that somehow did not break. I remember scooping each hot, trembling body into my work coat. I remember her walking beside me, close enough to touch, and my legs going weak, because in her eyes there was such a plea that I started to cry. I set the pups down in the wet sand and backed away. She took them one by one, and then the smoke swallowed her. I told myself it was done. I told myself I would never see any of them again. And now this. "Easy," I said out loud, though my voice came out thin. My breath made a small cloud in the chill. He flicked his nose once, twice, tasting the air between us. I could hear a lark somewhere above the fog. I could hear my pulse in my ears. My fingers found the door latch, pushed it open. The hinge squealed. He didn't flinch. I slid down from the seat and felt the wet grass cold through my boots. The distance closed by 1 step, his, and the sound of it was the softest thing, a pad pressing grass, a small exhale like someone easing a burden onto the ground. I've been around wild animals long enough to know when you are luck and when you are lunch. This was neither. This was something I did not have a name for. He kept his head level and his tail low, not tucked in fear, not raised in challenge. He held my gaze like a dog waiting for a signal, and yet he was not tame, not in any way. Wildness hummed off him the way heat hums off a road in August. It was the closeness that shook me, the unafraid closeness. He looked at me like I was his own. I crouched without thinking, hands open, palms out. I had grease under my nails and a slice on my thumb from a stubborn hose clamp, the metal smell of the tractor mixed with wet earth and the faint musk of him. He stepped closer, slow, close enough that if I reached, I could have touched the white patch under his jaw. I didn't reach. His eyes were amber, and in them I saw something I never expected to see in a predator's face looking straight at me. Recognition. Not the kind you project onto a memory when you want it to mean something. Real recognition, like the flicker people get when they place you in a story you once shared. My knees started to shake. Fear and reverence slammed together in my chest until I couldn't separate them. I thought of that day by the creek, of the wet sand, of the way the she-wolf had paused, just for a heartbeat, before taking the last pup, her eyes on mine, something like thanks passing through them so fast I could have said I imagined it. Only I hadn't imagined it then, and I sure wasn't imagining this now. He lowered his head, then lifted it and sniffed toward the tractor's front tire. Mud clung there from the low spot near the ditch that always stays soggy in spring. He stepped to the side and circled once, never showing me his back, never taking his eyes fully off me. He was reading the ground. It was like watching a person re-enter a room where a long-ago conversation once happened and search for the exact place they had stood. He stopped where my boot prints were dark in the grass from climbing down. He placed one paw inside one of them and left it there for a heartbeat. My throat tightened so hard it hurt. I don't know what made me do it, habit maybe, but I said, soft as I could, "You remember." I felt foolish the second the words left my mouth. But his ear twitched, and he breathed out, and for the life of me it felt like an answer. Behind him, the fog thinned and shifted, and I saw the shadow of the tree line, black and patient. I thought he'd turn then and make for the cover. I thought whatever thread had stretched between us would snap and leave me standing there with my heart in my hands and nothing to show for it but a story no one would believe. I even took a step back toward the tractor, ready to climb up and tell myself it was just a wolf doing a wolf's morning, and I had been the one to add meaning. I thought it was over, but he did not leave. He put his paw down, lifted his head again, and took one more step toward me. Close now. He tilted his head, just once, the way dogs do when they listen for words they know. The scar by his left eye, thin as thread, pale against gray, caught what little light there was. Had I seen that scar before, on a pup scrambling in my coat while ash rained? The thought split me open. I felt tears sting, ridiculous as that sounds for a grown man in a muddy field with a dead quiet tractor and a wild wolf breathing clouds in front of him. I was scared and grateful at the same time. I wanted to bow my head. I wanted to run. "Okay," I whispered, though I didn't know what I was agreeing to. He blinked again, slow, and then, God help me, his body softened, not in surrender, in trust. The kind of trust you don't ask for because you're not big enough to carry it if it's given. The kind that comes back to you after years like a debt repaid with interest you never expected. I stood there shaking, the fog lifting in thin veils, the field waking up around us, and I knew down to the bone that I had stepped into something I would not be able to explain. This was not chance. This was not hunger. This was not a mistake made by a foolish animal. This was a meeting, and whatever came next, it had been a long time coming. The smell of smoke has a way of settling into your skin, into your bones, until you can taste it even when you close your mouth. That day, 3 years ago, the whole sky was a burning bruise, and the air was so thick with ash it felt like breathing soup. The sun was gone behind the smoke. The heat came in waves that made the edges of the trees ripple like they were melting. You couldn't see more than 20 feet in front of the tractor, but I kept the blade down, grinding a path toward the river so the fire crews could get through. Every push of the throttle felt like shoving against the end of the world. The sound was constant, trees snapping like bones, the fire's roar eating everything, the tractor's engine screaming for air, and then, under it all, something else, faint, high-pitched, a squeal, maybe, or a cry. I told myself it was a branch breaking or a bird too stupid to fly away, but I couldn't shake it. I eased off the throttle. The engine sputtered and fell to a growl. There it was again, sharp, quick, and desperate. I swung down off the tractor, my boots sinking in the soft dirt churned by the blade. The heat was worse on the ground, like kneeling too close to a bonfire. I followed the sound, half blinded by smoke, my shirt sticking to my back. It came from the base of a scorched birch, the bark blackened and curling like old paint. There was a hole there, barely more than a dark slit in the earth. Inside, movement, a wriggle of small gray shapes, fur singed in patches, eyes still cloudy from being so young. Pups. Wolf pups. Before I could process that, a shape burst through the smoke, low, fast, and wide-shouldered. The mother. Her coat was ash-dusted. The fur along her spine bristled, but she didn't lunge. She didn't even snarl. She paced tight circles between me and the hole, her sides heaving, her eyes locked on mine like she was holding me there by will alone. We stared at each other, both of us too close to the fire, both of us not moving. The roar in my ears wasn't just the flames anymore. It was my own pulse. I could have backed away. I could have left. I didn't. I crouched instead, slow, lowering myself until I was at the level of her pups. She froze mid-step, panting hard, her tail low. Her gaze didn't waver, and in that look, through the smoke and the heat, was something I'll never forget. It wasn't challenge. It wasn't submission. It was a plea, a raw, silent begging that hit me like a hammer. There was such a plea in her eyes that I felt tears burn up behind mine. I pulled my work jacket off, wrapped it around the pups, one at a time, their tiny bodies trembling against my hands. They smelled of scorched fur and fear. The mother stood close enough that I could feel the heat from her body, but she didn't interfere. When I straightened with the bundle against my chest, she fell in step beside me. We moved through the smoke together, me, stumbling under the heat and weight, her, pacing at my side, glancing up at me like she was counting each step. At the riverbank, I laid them down on the damp sand. They whimpered and squirmed, their small paws clawing for the safety of her scent. She didn't rush. She touched each one with her nose, then lifted them gently, one after the other, carrying them to a patch of tall grass just beyond the reach of the fire's breath. When she came back for the last one, she paused, looked right at me, held it, just long enough for me to feel something pass between us, quick and wordless. Then she turned, vanished into the smoke with her pup in her jaws. I stood there until the river's cool air finally reached me, until the trees around me were just shadows in the ash. I thought that was the end. I thought she would vanish into whatever wild corner she called home, and I would never see her, or them, again. But nature had a different plan. He stood there, silent, as if carved out of the fog itself. No growl, no bared teeth, just that unblinking stare that reached deeper than it should have. His chest rose and fell in slow rhythm, and even from a few yards away I could see the frost of his breath bloom in the cool air. Then the brush behind him shifted. A ripple in the green, a low shuffle, and two more shapes emerged, smaller, but not by much. Their coats were thick with the same silver gray as his, their eyes the same gold that caught and held you. They moved without hurry, their steps measured, as though this meeting had been decided long before I'd stepped into the field that morning. One of them carried something in its jaws, a limp shape, long ears dangling. My mind went instantly to defense, the old reflexes firing. 3 wolves, close range, nowhere to climb if they decided I was worth the effort. But then I noticed their posture. Tails low, ears relaxed, heads not angled to strike. It wasn't the stance of hunters closing in. It was something else entirely. The smaller wolf came forward, the rabbit's fur swaying with each step. It stopped just short of the tractor, close enough for me to see the flecks of mud on its legs, then bent its head and set the rabbit down on the damp earth. No tearing, no feeding, just placing it there, neat and deliberate. My breath caught. A gift. The big one, him, took a single step toward me, his eyes never leaving mine. And in that moment, in that gaze that didn't waver, I felt it, as surely as I've ever felt anything. He was looking at me like I was his own. Not prey, not a stranger, something else, something remembered. I didn't move. Neither did they. The air between us felt fragile, like a wire strung too tight. The big wolf lowered his head briefly toward the rabbit, then stepped back, his paws silent in the grass. The younger two shifted, ready to follow his lead. I thought that was it. I thought they'd leave, fading into the trees, with that strange offering left behind for me to puzzle over alone. But I should have known better. The rain the night before had turned the far edge of the field into a patch of deep, sucking mud, but I'd been too focused on the wolves to think about it. When I climbed back into the tractor and tried to move, the rear wheels spun in place, spraying dark arcs of muck. I eased the throttle, tried rocking it forward and back, but the tires only sank deeper, the machine leaning just enough to make my stomach knot. I glanced toward the tree line, half expecting the wolves to have vanished while I was distracted. They hadn't. The big one stood exactly where he'd been, ears forward, watching me. The two younger wolves paced in a slow arc, their paws leaving prints in the softened ground. Then something happened. I still can't quite explain. Instead of melting into the safety of the woods, they came closer. The smaller of the pair trotted to the rear wheel, sniffing at the churned earth, then began digging, powerful swipes of its paws, flinging mud in clumps. The other joined in at the opposite wheel, widening the trench like they knew exactly what I was trying to do. I just sat there staring, hands loose on the wheel. Wolves digging out a tractor. It was absurd. And yet there it was, happening in front of me. The big wolf moved last. He circled to the side of the cab, close enough that I could see the rise and fall of his ribs. Then he leaned his shoulder into the lower frame of the tractor. It wasn't a battering shove, more of a steady, braced push, his claws finding grip in the mud. The cab tilted slightly under the pressure, just enough to shift the weight. I pressed the throttle. The engine roared, the wheels caught, and with a sucking groan, the tractor lurched free of the hole, spattering all of us with cold mud. I cut the engine again, heart pounding. The smaller wolves backed off, their coats splattered brown, tongues lolling slightly as they caught their breath. The big one stepped away from the side of the machine, shook once, and looked up at me. That same steady, measuring gaze. No rush, no fear, just acknowledgement. Then he turned, flicked his tail once, and headed for the trees. The younger two followed without a sound. I thought that was it. That whatever strange thread bound us had finally gone slack and they'd disappear into the wild where they belonged. But I was wrong. A week later, I found myself back in the same stretch of field, the ground firmer now, the air carrying the first warmth of spring. I wasn't expecting anything. Truth be told, I'd convinced myself that the whole encounter had been a one-time thing, some strange and fleeting intersection of lives. But then I saw it, right in the center of the dirt track where my tires would pass, lay a small, neat pile of fish, 4 of them, silver and still glistening in the morning light, arranged as carefully as if someone had set them out for market. No drag marks, no scatter, just placed there, waiting. I cut the engine and stepped down, boots crunching in the gravel. The smell of fresh water and scales reached me, sharp and clean. These fish hadn't been dead long. I crouched, touching one lightly, cool to the skin. They were an offering. Something made me look up toward the edge of the woods. There they were, 3 silhouettes standing in the break between the trees, still as stone. The big one in front, the 2 younger behind him. Even from here I could feel the weight of their eyes. No movement, no sound, just that quiet, patient watching. Then the big wolf lifted his head. The sound that followed rolled across the field, not the sharp, defiant cry I'd heard on winter nights, but a long, low note that swelled and softened at the edges. It was not a warning. It was not a challenge. It was farewell. I felt something shift in my chest, a tightness that was part ache, part awe. In that moment, standing there with the scent of fish in the air and the sun breaking through behind them, I understood without doubt. They had come to return the debt. The big wolf held my gaze for one last heartbeat, then turned, leading the others into the shadows of the trees. This time, I didn't try to follow. I just stood there, the wind brushing past me, watching until the forest swallowed them whole. I stood there long after the last shadow slipped into the trees, staring at the empty clearing as if they might step back out again. The pile of fish lay at my feet, the morning sun catching on their scales, and all I could hear was the echo of that low, rolling call still hanging in my chest. It came over me slow at first, then all at once. The truth I'd been circling around since that foggy morning a week ago. Those wolves, they were the pups I had carried out of the fire, grown now, stronger, with the kind of wild self-possession you only see in creatures that survive both nature and man. They hadn't just found me, they'd remembered, and they'd come back. For a moment I wondered if I was building a story out of nothing, stitching old memories to new moments because I wanted it to mean something. Maybe they weren't the same wolves. Maybe this was just coincidence dressed up as fate. But then I looked down at the ground. The road was soft from last night's rain, and there they were, 3 sets of fresh tracks leading straight from the forest's edge to where I stood. No mistaking them, no talking myself out of what I'd seen. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I swallowed hard, the back of my throat tight, and found my voice dropping to a whisper, not because I was afraid, but because anything louder would have broken whatever was still lingering in the space between us. "This doesn't happen," I murmured, almost to myself. "It can't happen." I closed my eyes for a second, saw again the smoke, the trembling pups in my jacket, the she-wolf's eyes holding mine, and now, these 3, standing in the trees with a gift at their feet. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was still empty. The tracks were still there, the fish still glistened in the sun. "It doesn't happen," I said again, my voice no more than breath. But I saw it. I saw it myself,